For a look into what this means for the future of jobs in the United States, I'm joined from Washington by the Executive Director of the National Employment Law Project, Christine Owens. Ms. Owens, welcome to Bottom Line.
Thank you so much, Mark. Always
good to have you back on. One thing that stood out for me, it seems that as you get older, it's harder for Americans to get a job. How hard is it?
It's really tough. You know, the last story talked about unemployment among younger workers, it being about 15%. Well, actual unemployment rates among older workers are somewhat lower, but when you look at long-term unemployment, it's much higher among older workers. And the older you are, the longer you're going to remain unemployed. There are lots of reasons for that. One is garden variety age discrimination. One is a resistance on the part of employers to hire people when they're unemployed, and that just takes a special toll on older workers.
Well, talk to me then about some of these job openings that folks have been expressing concerns about. Some of them specifically saying that if you've been out of work for a number of weeks or a number of months, that you need not apply. Isn't that illegal?
It's not illegal on its face. It could be illegal because it has the effect of excluding older workers disproportionately or people of color disproportionately. There are a couple of states. New Jersey has recently passed legislation that would make it illegal, and New York is considering legislation, and there is actually legislation in Congress, and other members are looking at other possibilities. It's a huge problem. We are doing some additional research into this, and we're continuing to find ads that tell workers that unless they're currently employed, they need not apply.
Ms. Owens, your advocacy group, the National Employment Law Project, also having a displaced workers survey, and that covers the period from January of '07 to December of '09. What did you find?
Well, this was the Labor Department survey. It does
okay.
a displaced worker survey every 3 years. And so its most recent survey found that the re-employment rate among unemployed workers, people who lost their jobs during that 3-year period, was only 50%. And compared to the previous 3 years, in which 2/3 of unemployed workers had found replacement jobs. And it also found that far fewer re-employed workers over the most recent period had found jobs that paid as much or more than their previous job than had been the case in the 3 preceding years. In fact, the re-employment level was at its lowest level since the department began these surveys in 1984. And it really speaks to how tough it is for unemployed workers to find jobs today, because we continue to have a serious jobs deficit.
And about half of those jobs that were lost during the downturn, did come from the higher wage industries. Are we seeing a lot slower comeback now?
We're seeing much slower comeback than in any other recession, including the one we had in 2001. You know, there's been virtually no growth at all in construction, and the last report about the bad news we had today about new home contracts reinforces that's just an industry that's continuing to suffer tremendously. Finance hasn't really bounced back. Manufacturing had begun to bounce back, but that's slowing again, and we've seen a long-term trend in the loss of manufacturing jobs. So there's some improvement, but we are still really in a deep hole, especially when it comes to these good, high-paying jobs.
Ms. Owens, one of the other things in the survey that actually stood out for me was, unfortunately, not good news for recent college graduates, and that is that a college degree is not necessarily your ticket to a new job or even a higher paying job.
That's absolutely true. And if you think about it, we still have more than 4 unemployed workers for every job opening. A lot of those folks are really qualified and are looking actively for work. So there's just a lot of competition out there for jobs. And across the board, we're finding that people are having to settle for lower quality jobs, lower paid jobs than they're either educated for or trained to do. So a college degree, while it's a great thing to have, is just not any kind of guarantee of a good job in this economy.
Ms. Owens, when does this start to turn around?
It starts to turn around when we start having really robust job growth, and these stronger industries with better quality jobs start adding more jobs again. I can't give you a date. In fact, if anything, I think
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I was going to say, I'm sure I didn't mean to ask you to look into your crystal ball, but
Right.
I was actually trying to go towards more of, it seems that now it's going to have to be more entrepreneurial, more small business, and perhaps the private sector taking the lead, because we're seeing some states around the country where they are having this little tension going on between local governments and public workers unions.
Well, it's not just the tensions, but you hit on something that I was about to say, which is we are seeing states and local governments around the country struggling to meet budget deficits, and of course they can't run deficits, and so they are just slicing their workforces, teachers, firefighters, public service workers across the board, and there is a spillover effect when you start losing a lot of public sector employment. So in some ways, we're facing a prospect of things getting even worse instead of getting better. I hope that's not what happens, but there is a price to pay from these budget cuts.
Christine Owens, she is the Executive Director of the National Employment Law Project. Ms. Owens, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I hope we can call on you again in the future as we follow this story.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.